What if I told you that in 2025 an unprecedented tragedy could occur? There are those who believe that a colossal earthquake and tsunami will strike the country that year, to the point of comparing it to their own end of the world. Although it sounds like something out of an apocalyptic movie, it's surprising to know that multiple figures who claim to have prophetic abilities point to exactly the same year and the same place. This raises a disturbing question. Is it really possible that Japan could face a disaster of such magnitude in 2025? And how are the Japanese responding? To better understand it, we must review the sources of these predictions. What's curious is that they don't come from just one place. They're people from different backgrounds who, without knowing each other, coincide in pointing to 2025 as a key year. Something about that year seems to awaken a collective warning. Among the most striking names in this story is Ryo Tatsuki, a Japanese artist who has earned the nickname the Illustrator of Prophetic Dreams. Although his main work is manga, his followers claim he has predicted major tragedies through his dreams, which he later captures in his comics. One of his most impactful cases happened in 1999 when he published a manga titled The Future I Saw, a compilation of 15 strange dreams. The most disturbing thing is what appears on its cover. Great Disaster, March 2011, exactly the month in which the catastrophic East Japan earthquake and tsunami occurred. He predicted it 12 years in advance, and it's not an isolated case. On January 2, 1995, Tatsuki dreamed of a strong earthquake, and exactly 15 days later, the devastating Hanshin earthquake occurred. These types of coincidences have left many with goosebumps, and one lingering question: are they mere coincidences, or real signs? Ryo Tatsuki, the Japanese illustrator known for his unsettling prophetic dreams, is once again in the media spotlight. Today, he is 70 years old, and he has revealed something that has made many people nervous. He claims that on September 5, 2025, a catastrophic magnitude earthquake will occur. According to the dreams he had, and recorded in his work, the scene unfolds in the middle of summer. He deduces this because, in his vision, everyone was wearing light, short-sleeved clothing. The exact moment seems to be between sunrise and sunset, around 4:18 or 5 p.m., based on what he remembers from the clock he saw in the dream and the time when his mother used to get off work. But the most disturbing thing isn't the date or the time. It's what happens afterward. In his dream, the earth suddenly splits apart. The epicenter of the earthquake would be right in the center of the triangle formed by Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. A violent explosion shakes the ocean and provokes a brutal agitation of the sea. In the sky, two colossal clouds, shaped like dragons, move toward the epicenter from the eastern Pacific. And at that moment, everything explodes. From the depths of the sea, a new landmass emerges, so enormous it seems to unite Taiwan, the Philippines, and Hong Kong as if they were part of the same bridge. But that is not salvation. It's the beginning of hell. The ocean opens up, burning lava emerges from an underwater crack, and the water literally starts to boil. Suddenly, a monstrous wave more than 100 meters high rises. The tsunami launches, itself furiously against the entire region. Japan is the first to be hit. The coastal zones disappear in seconds. 1/3 of the country sinks beneath the sea. And it doesn't end there. Taiwan, the Philippines, Hong Kong, and other regions also suffer devastating damage. The whole Asia-Pacific area becomes engulfed in a hell of water, fire, and destruction. In his vision, Ryo sees himself, alongside his mother and sister. None survive. The tsunami sweeps them away, and their funeral would be held on September 15th. Reality? Fiction? A warning from the subconscious, or just a mere coincidence? The truth is that this account contains all the ingredients of a disaster movie, but it was dreamed by someone who has already predicted tragedies before. And that's what makes it so chilling. If his predictions hadn't come true so many times, anyone would think that what Ryo Tatsuki says is pure fantasy. But the facts are hard to ignore. Out of the 15 prophetic dreams he has documented, 10 have already come true. And among those still pending, there's one that stands out above all: a devastating earthquake in 2025. That's why it's no surprise that many people are uneasy, even afraid. Because when someone who predicted the 2011 earthquake 12 years in advance says seriously, an even greater tragedy will come in the summer of 2025, it's impossible not to pay attention. What if this time he's right again? But Ryo is not the only one who has issued this warning. There is another character, just as mysterious, who has predicted the same disaster. He calls himself the time traveler from the year 2062. Although his story seems taken from a science fiction novel, he has captured the attention of thousands of people in Japan. It all began in November 2010, when an anonymous user appeared out of nowhere on Japan's largest forum. He claimed to come from the future, from the year 2062. At first, he was dismissed as a troll or just another eccentric looking for fame. But what happened afterward changed many people's perception. Before the end of 2010, he issued a cryptic warning: "Take refuge in the mountains." And just a few months later, in March 2011, the tragic earthquake and tsunami of East Japan occurred. Was it a veiled warning to stay away from the coast? The coincidence was so shocking that people began to investigate his previous messages. And yes, the warning was there. In July 2011, he wrote again, "Something important will happen in April 2016. And indeed, in that same month, the Kumamoto earthquake occurred. The most impressive part was his precision. He said he would return on April 1st, 2016, and on April 14th, the main quake was felt, just hours before the 15th. As if that weren't enough, he also announced he would return on May 17th. And on May 16th, there was another strong quake in Ibaraki. After so many coincidences, doubt began to creep into many users' minds. What if this time traveler is actually telling the truth? With two separate sources pointing to the year 2025 as the scene of a catastrophe in Japan, the question is not whether we should blindly believe, but whether we should start preparing just in case. Over time, that strange character who called himself the time traveler from the year 2062 began to attract the attention of thousands of people. His fame grew so much that internet users started bombarding him with questions about what was to come, trying to extract information about the fate of the world. Although his responses were ambiguous and often cryptic, he dropped some predictions that still cause chills today. One of the most disturbing involves the year 2025. The supposed traveler claimed that in that year, a globally impactful event would occur, and that Japan would be one of the most affected countries. He didn't offer specific details about the nature of the disaster, but considering that his past predictions have been related to earthquakes and tsunamis, many fear he may be anticipating a massive quake or large-scale natural tragedy. But his visions of the future don't stop there. Amid his most controversial statements, he dropped surprising ideas. In the year 2062, some of today's world powers no longer exist, and Japan's territory has expanded. Although these claims sound outrageous, they generate even more mystery around this character. But that's a topic that deserves another video. The truth is that this mysterious internet user, thanks to his supposed past successes, such as predicting the 311 tsunami or the Kumamoto earthquake, has managed to ensure that many don't dismiss him completely. Although not everyone believes him, more and more people are paying close attention to his warnings, wondering if he might be right once again. And if his timeline hasn't been altered, then maybe his warning about Japan in 2025 isn't as far-fetched as it seems. We can be skeptical, we can think logically, but when different voices from distinct corners begin to point to the same year and the same kind of disaster, it's almost impossible not to feel a chill. We're not only talking about isolated dreamers or supposed time travelers. In Japan, there are also authors and researchers who have spent years studying the phenomenon of prophetic dreams, and their findings are, at the very least, unsettling. In recent years, several books on this topic have become bestsellers in Japan. They compile testimonies from ordinary citizens who claim to have dreamed of events that later came true. By analyzing hundreds of accounts, researchers noticed an alarming coincidence. Many of those dreams announce a major earthquake at some point during the 2020s, with particular emphasis on the year 2025. And here's where things get even stranger. People who have never met or known each other report dreams with similar scenes of destruction. Different contexts, different locations, but the same date. How is it possible that the collective subconscious is pointing to the same moment in time? Some experts dare to propose a provocative hypothesis. What if humans have a dormant intuition? A kind of emotional radar that activates before major disasters and manifests through dreams? Of course, there is still no definitive scientific explanation. But the truth is that these accounts accumulate year after year. And there are so many of them, so similar and so specific, that it's hard to simply ignore them. As expected, not everyone believes in these prophecies. Many think that after the viral spread of Ryo Tatsuki's dreams and other seers, a kind of collective suggestion has emerged. In other words, people aren't dreaming about disasters because they sense them, but because they've already been conditioned by what they've read or heard, and maybe they're right. But what's undeniable is that, at least in Japan, the year 2025 has become an obsession in circles related to prophecies. And in the age of social media, this information no longer stays only in Japan. It has crossed borders and now generates debate worldwide. In summary, we've already talked about all kinds of sources: a manga artist with unsettling dreams, a supposed time traveler, book authors, and even researchers of the collective subconscious. All agree on one thing. Japan could face an unprecedented catastrophe in 2025, one that not only includes earthquakes and tsunamis, but almost apocalyptic scenarios, like the emergence of a new continent or the collapse of part of the Japanese archipelago. But the big question remains. Are we facing a prediction that keeps getting exaggerated over time? Or are we simply witnessing how a rumor, repeated 1,000 times, begins to sound like the truth? That's why, in the next part, we're going to pause and shift the focus. Let's leave behind visions and mysterious theories for a moment, and put our feet on the ground. What does science say about the real possibility of a mega earthquake in Japan? Because no matter how vivid the prophecies may be, no dream can surpass the precision of scientific data and studies. It's time to analyze the facts. So then, leaving aside all the prophecies, dreams, and time travelers, What does science say about the real possibility that Japan will suffer a mega earthquake in the coming years? The answer, though unsettling, is clear. The risk is very high. One of the main areas of concern among scientists is the famous Nankai Trough, a gigantic underwater fault located off the southwestern coast of Japan. This area has been, throughout history, the epicenter of several devastating earthquakes, all with magnitudes over 8. In fact, according to a report by the Earthquake Research Committee of the Japanese government, it is estimated that there is a 70% probability that a magnitude 9 quake will strike this zone in the next 30 years. Yes, you heard that right, 70%. We're not talking about a remote or hypothetical possibility. It is very likely that something like this could happen in our own generation. And be careful. This figure is not an unfounded assumption. It's based on serious studies that analyze the historical seismic cycles of the region and the current accumulation of tension between tectonic plates. So even if we completely ignore the prophecies, science is already giving us a strong warning. Japan is at real risk of facing a mega earthquake, and it could be sooner than we think. The last major earthquake in the Nankai Trough area occurred almost 80 years ago. Japan experienced 2 devastating events during that time: the Tonankai earthquake in 1944, the Nankai earthquake in 1946. Although to us 8 decades seems like a long time, from a geological perspective, it's not that long. What's worrying is that, according to historical records, these mega-earthquakes tend to repeat every 100 to 150 years, which means we are entering the period in which the next one should statistically occur. And many scientists believe there won't be a need to wait until 2050. The year 2025 lies right within the critical window, and if we consider Japan's position in the world, the situation becomes even more delicate. The country is located right in the heart of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone surrounded by tectonic plates in constant friction, where geological activity is a permanent threat. In recent years, this ring has shown itself to be more active than ever. Just look at a few recent events: 2010, earthquake and tsunami in Chile 2011, the Great East Japan earthquake 3/11/2018, tsunami in the Sunda Strait, Indonesia 2021, strong offshore quake near Alaska. 2022, underwater volcanic eruption in Tonga, which caused tsunamis and shockwaves worldwide. What worries seismologists is that when one of these plates activates violently, it doesn't do so alone. That movement can redistribute tensions to other plates, putting new seismic zones at risk in the following years. In simple terms, mega-earthquakes may not arrive in isolation, but in a chain. And if we follow that pattern, Japan might be closer to one of those events than we imagine. Since the devastating earthquake in 2011 in Japan, known as 3/11, scientists have noticed a change in global seismic behavior. The pressures between nearby tectonic plates seem to have been redistributed, and experts continue to monitor these changes closely. What does this mean? That the possibility of another quake of similar or even greater magnitude remains latent. This is not a matter of the past, it's a present and future risk. Japan, due to its critical location, must be especially alert. And for that reason, researchers have not stood idly by. Although there still isn't a reliable way to predict earthquakes in the short term, there are ongoing efforts exploring new avenues. Monitoring of underground waters tracking electromagnetic changes in the atmosphere, even observing animal behavior prior to tremors. Since the 2020s, the country has refined its early warning system. This can gain valuable seconds before seismic waves arrive, which could make a difference in saving lives. But if it's a magnitude 9 mega-earthquake with a tsunami, like those feared to be caused by the Nankai Trough, that reaction time won't be enough to prevent devastation. In fact, the Japanese government has run simulations of the worst possible scenario. If the Nankai Trough collapses in a chain reaction, the resulting tsunami could strike the Pacific coast brutally. In that case, the estimated number of victims could exceed 300,000 people, and the economic losses would be so massive that they're difficult to even calculate. Does this sound like apocalyptic predictions from prophets and dreamers? Well, science doesn't need exaggerations to show us that the risk is real. Even if we completely ignore dreams and mysterious prophecies, current geological studies are reason enough to stay alert. And yes, the period around the year 2025 falls within the most critical range. Now then, many prophecies speak of Japan sinking, 100-meter tsunamis, or new continents forming. Is that possible? From a scientific point of view, no. Those images are clearly symbolic, dramatized, or physically impossible. But if those visions were an artistic way of representing a disaster, then even a fraction of that catastrophe could cause immense damage. In summary, although the prophetic version may seem like a science fiction movie, the scientific reality is already alarming enough. Even the most skeptical and rational scientists have had to accept it. Japan faces a monumental challenge, not against fantastic creatures, but against something much more real and powerful: nature itself. Let's imagine for a moment, without alarmism, just as a mental exercise, that the great earthquake so many talk about really happens in 2025. Whether it's something catastrophic, like what Ryo Tatsuki saw in his dream, or simply a magnitude 9 seismic event accompanied by a tsunami. What consequences could we expect? We don't have to look very far to find clues. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami left nearly 20,000 people dead or missing, marking one of the worst disasters in Japan's modern history. If something even more devastating were to occur, the number of victims could reach hundreds of thousands. In fact, that chilling figure is not just part of a prophecy. The Japanese government, in its own studies, also estimates that possibility, in its most extreme scenario. We're not talking about science fiction, but about official projections. Think of the major coastal cities like Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, or Yokohama. Although they are equipped with anti-seismic technology and advanced emergency systems, no one can guarantee they would withstand a catastrophe that exceeds the margins for which they were designed. If a tsunami manages to surpass the coastal levees, the low-lying areas could be swallowed by the sea in a matter of seconds. Homes, hospitals, schools, many buildings would collapse. Fires could break out, massive power and water outages could occur, and chaos would reign in the streets. The economic losses would be colossal, probably in the hundreds of trillions of yen. And if, as in Tatsuki's dream, part of Japan's territory were to sink, we would be facing a scenario of mass migrations. Millions of people would be left homeless, forced to be relocated in a country with limited space and resources. That, restructuring alone, would be a logistical and humanitarian nightmare. So it's not about believing or not in prophecies. It's enough to observe the data, the background, and the scientific simulations to realize one thing: the risk is there. And it's real. One of Japan's greatest fears is not just the shaking of the earth, but what may come afterward. With dozens of nuclear plants located along its coast, the country walks a dangerous line. We all remember what happened in 2011, when the earthquake not only devastated cities, but also caused the Fukushima nuclear disaster, a radioactive leak, whose consequences still persist. Today, one of the most concerning facilities is the Hamaoka nuclear plant, located near the feared Nankai Trough. If the earthquake so widely discussed for 2025 affects that area, we could be facing a new and devastating nuclear incident, and Japan wouldn't be the only one to suffer. All of East Asia could be affected by contamination of the sea, air, and soil, rendering entire regions uninhabitable for years. To this, another threat is added. Although it may sound like something out of a movie, Ryo Tatsuki dreamed of magma erupting from the bottom of the ocean. It may sound implausible, but science doesn't entirely rule it out. A major earthquake can activate underwater volcanoes or trigger chemical leaks, bringing large-scale environmental damage. But the consequences wouldn't be limited to the environment. Japan is not just any country, it's the third largest economy on the planet. A disaster of this magnitude would have a domino effect. The yen would plummet, the stock market would panic, insurers would face multi-million-dollar losses, and worst of all, the global supply chain would be severely disrupted. Japan manufactures everything from cars to computer chips. If its factories shut down, we would soon see shortages of spare parts, electronic components. Even video game consoles would become luxury items. It may sound trivial, but it shows how interconnected we are. Moreover, Japan invests heavily abroad. In the midst of an emergency, funds would return to the country, causing shocks in international markets. So what begins as a natural disaster on an island turns into a global economic crisis. Faced with something like this, the international community would have to act. With military bases in Japan, the United States would be one of the first to respond. And even though political tensions exist, China, South Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan would likely prioritize humanitarian aid. An event like this could unite the world or put it to the test. Coordination, solidarity, but also possible conflicts over scarce resources, rescue zones, and refugee crises. What could be an opportunity for global cooperation might also reveal our deepest divisions. Imagine an extreme scenario. Part of Japan's territory collapses and sinks beneath the sea. It wouldn't just be a natural catastrophe. It would be the beginning of a new era. Some small islands could disappear without a trace, altering the map as we know it. And if a new landmass truly emerged, a new continent, the world would have to redraw its borders. Who would own that territory? Geopolitical disputes wouldn't take long to appear. Even if it sounds like science fiction, it's not a bad idea to pause and think about it. But even if no new land appears, a 100-meter tsunami would be enough to leave scars across several continents. It wouldn't only strike Japan. The west coast of the United States and Canada would suffer damage, and countries like Peru and Chile would also detect unusual waves. A tragedy of that magnitude knows no borders. It's a pain shared by all. Humanity. If Japan were to face an earthquake of such magnitude in 2025, its society would be marked for generations. Beyond the rubble, survivors would have to rebuild their lives from loss, destroyed homes, missing family members, and an emotionally fractured country. After the 2011 earthquake, the Japanese people united around the word kizuna, which means bonds or connection. It was a symbol of unity in the face of adversity. But if a new disaster occurs, will they cling to that spirit again? Or will there be those who break under the weight of the tragedy? Younger generations could lose faith in the future. Imagine it, growing up in a country where part of your homeland has sunk. It's a blow not only physical, but emotional. And while all this is happening, the world would be watching in real time. Live broadcasts of such a catastrophe would generate a collective impact. Other earthquake-prone countries like Taiwan or California would begin to take drills, anti-seismic architecture, and prevention strategies seriously. Curiously, all of this was anticipated in a manga titled The Future I Saw, created by Ryo Tatsuki. If his visions come true, perhaps the world will begin to look differently at premonitory dreams and sixth sense phenomena. In summary, a disaster like this wouldn't affect only Japan. It would change lives on an individual level, alter the structure of the nation, and have global effects. A multidimensional transformation without precedent. No one wants something like this to happen. Ideally, this would remain just a story to discuss during a calm conversation, but the doubt has already been planted, and the most responsible thing we can do is prepare. As the proverb says, in times of calm, prepare for the storm. Precisely. Because the consequences would be so devastating, now is the time to act, strengthen our defenses, and make sure that if destiny knocks on our door, we're ready to resist. After so much information about earthquakes, tsunamis, nuclear leaks, and economic chaos, it's normal to feel a bit overwhelmed. But wait a moment. What if we turn the camera toward Japan and observe how they react to all these prophecies circulating online? Did they panic? Are they stocking up on supplies like crazy? Evacuating entire cities? The reality is very different, and it will probably bring a smile to your face. Instead of falling into absolute fear, many Japanese have responded with a unique mix of calm, philosophy, and a touch of humor. Imagine someone tells you that your city is going to sink soon. What would you do? You'd probably think about packing an emergency backpack, learning evacuation routes, or even moving away for a while. However, Japanese forums show a completely different face. On social media and online communities, especially among younger people, the responses have been unexpectedly relaxed, even poetic. For example, some said, "If everything is really going to end, I want to see the last sunrise from the most beautiful place possible." Others plan to climb Mount Fuji to witness how the sea swallows everything from the summit, as if it were a unique spectacle, a kind of end of the world with a panoramic view. This serene and ritualistic way of facing chaos is so surreal that many foreigners find it hard to believe. "Seriously? This is so zen," they exclaimed online. "It's not escape. It's not hysteria. It's almost a spiritual excursion. And that's not all." There are also those who, with dark humor, plan to spend their last day as if it were a celebration. "I'll book a room in a hotel with an onsen, drink sake, and enjoy my last hours in style," commented one user. Another said with laughter, "I'll die hugging my manga and anime figures in Akihabara. Let the end of the world find me as a happy otaku." They even debate which snacks would be ideal for that final party. Far from being paralyzed by fear, they prefer to accept the inevitable with a sarcastic smile. This very Japanese reaction, somewhere between philosophical, artistic, and absurd, reminds us that there are many ways to face fear, and that sometimes, when destiny can't be changed, the best thing to do is laugh at it. While in other countries, the idea of an apocalyptic disaster would provoke chaos and paranoia, in Japan, the story is different. The creative responses of some Japanese people to the supposed 2025 catastrophe have left the whole world speechless. Internet users in the United States and the United Kingdom couldn't believe it. They commented things like, "How calm can they be? It's like a scene straight out of the movie Don't Look Up." That satire about the end of the world where no one takes anything seriously. Others wondered if all this was real or a live-action anime script. "This is too much," they exclaimed on social media. "I didn't know someone could react to the apocalypse with such calm. It's like they were born for this." But beyond the astonishment, there was also admiration. What an impressive mental strength! The Japanese have truly weathered many storms. But attention, this doesn't mean they don't feel fear. Quite the opposite. Those who know their culture understand that this attitude is deeply rooted in their way of seeing life. There is a key word, shoganai. It literally means nothing can be done, so we must accept it. This phrase reflects a philosophy of resignation in the face of the inevitable, not from passivity, but from serenity. In a nation where earthquakes are part of daily life, the Japanese have cultivated incredible emotional resilience and a humor that borders on the absurd. Yes, there are those who prepare with discipline. They store water, inspect their homes, participate in emergency drills, but those aren't the ones who go viral. What captures attention on social media are the outrageous plans, the theatrical responses, those who decide to watch the last sunrise from a hill or die hugging their favorite anime figures. Because although fear is present, they face it with a unique mix of fatalism, calm, and a touch of dark humor. And perhaps that's why their way of looking at the end of the world fascinates us so much. Because instead of running, they stop to contemplate. When anxiety takes hold of many in the face of a possible catastrophe, something very particular happens in Japan. They transform fear into art, humor, and collective reflection. Some mangaka have begun to imagine what a post-apocalyptic Japan would be like. They draw submerged cities, destroyed landscapes, and alternative futures as if they wanted to warn us of the disaster, but at the same time, with a satirical tone. It's their way of channeling concern. Even some video game developers have used the idea of a Japan 2025 as a source of inspiration to create worlds where players rebuild society after chaos. On social media, creativity has also exploded. A user on Twitter launched a simple but powerful question. If the world ended on July 5th, what would be the last thing you'd want to do? The responses were as diverse as they were emotional. Some spoke of confessing hidden loves. Others dreamed of tasting every possible flavor of ramen, and there were those who simply wanted to sleep until it was all over. This kind of conversation, both comical and sincere, became a sort of collective therapy. By talking about fear, they reduce it. By imagining the end, they make it manageable. That unique mix of serenity and absurdity sums up the Japanese reaction well, an illogical calm, but deeply human. On one hand, their positive attitude is admirable. On the other, the jokes and online antics manage to provoke laughter even amid global panic. But don't be mistaken. Behind the humor, there is real preparation. Japan doesn't take these matters lightly. While some laugh, the government and civil organizations reinforce preventive education, improve infrastructure, and promote earthquake preparedness. Most buildings are constructed to withstand earthquakes. Schools regularly conduct drills. Homes have emergency backpacks. Even on the radio, evacuation instructions occasionally play. This duality, laughing in public, preparing in private, defines Japanese culture. It's not a lack of seriousness. It's another way of resisting fear, with creativity, with resilience, and with humor. And then, the big question arises. What should we do in the face of scenarios like this? Laugh as a form of defense? Prepare with discipline? Or both? Perhaps the key isn't choosing just one path, but combining calm with action, humor with responsibility. Thus we reach the end of this story, as unsettling as it is fascinating. From the apocalyptic visions of artists and video games, to the stoic, and sometimes hilarious, reactions of the Japanese people. A story that seems like a cross between science fiction, philosophy, and humanity, but which, in reality, is happening here and now. When an alarming prophecy crosses our path, an inevitable question arises. Should we panic, or analyze it with a cool head? The first thing we must remember is that a prophecy is not a fact, but a possibility. Throughout the centuries, the world has been plagued by predictions about the end of times, and the vast majority have turned out to be false. Do you remember the famous end of the world supposedly brought by the Mayan calendar in 2012? Millions lived that December in anguish, and in the end, nothing happened. The sun rose like any other day. There have been warnings about comets colliding with Earth, alien invasions, and even energy catastrophes. But almost all of those predictions have come to nothing. Just because someone was right in the past doesn't mean they can accurately predict what's coming. The future, by nature, is unpredictable. Let's take the case of Ryo Tatsuki. Although some of his dreams seem to have anticipated important events, it's also true that dreams can be vague, symbolic, or misinterpreted. Not everything we dream is a clear vision of tomorrow. Hopefully this time his visions won't come true, and about the supposed time traveler from 2062, it's likely nothing more than a joke, a viral strategy, or a striking coincidence. Studies on prophetic dreams are also often loaded with subjectivity. That's why panicking irrationally, as if 2025 were marked in fire as the year of disaster, makes no sense. Living under that constant fear only deteriorates our quality of life. But here comes the balance. Just because many prophecies have failed doesn't mean we should ignore all warnings. Beyond mysterious messages or strange dreams, there are real signs the planet is giving us: the melting of the poles, the increase in extreme weather events, the constant seismic movements. All of that is already speaking to us about possible threats. It doesn't need to be said by a prophet. Nature itself is ringing the alarm bell. Science can also be seen as a form of prophecy, only it's based on data, analysis, and probabilities. When a prediction aligns with what science is already indicating, perhaps it's worth paying more attention. That's why not only Japan, but all regions prone to earthquakes or tsunamis should stay on guard. Promote drills, secure infrastructure, have emergency kits at home, and establish family protocols for critical situations. In summary, neither fall into irrational fear nor look the other way with disdain. Let's learn to prepare responsibly, keeping calm and acting with common sense. There's something we must not forget. Beyond what may or may not happen in 2025, being prepared is never a bad idea. Earthquakes, like other natural disasters, don't ask when they'll arrive. It's only a matter of time. So taking preventive measures is an investment in safety, not a reaction to fear. Now then, if we closely observe the phenomenon of popular prophecies, we also see a reflection of great collective anxiety. In times of crisis, wars, or catastrophes, it's common for more messages from destiny to appear. Why? Because human beings fear uncertainty. And when there are no clear answers, they sometimes turn to mystical explanations. More than being revealed truths, prophecies are often emotional expressions. They give us a false sense of control. In a way, believing that someone already knows what will happen comforts us, even if it's not rational. At least that way, we feel we're not completely in the dark. But if we look closely, each supposed seer announces a different destiny. Some predict destruction, others speak of rebirth. Who is right? The reality is that we won't know until the moment arrives. That's why, for those of us without a crystal ball, the most sensible thing is to keep an open mind but with our feet on the ground. Look at these announcements with interest, yes, but also with discernment. Sometimes prophecies can inspire or entertain us, and that's not a bad thing. But we must not let fear control us. In this analysis, we explored prophetic messages, contrasted them with science, added a touch of humor, and tried to understand why they affect us so much, all with the goal of seeing the topic from various angles, without falling into extremes. So then, what should we believe? The answer seems clear. Trust in facts, use common sense, prepare intelligently, and keep hope alive. Will 2025 be a tragic year? Or will it simply pass like any other year, and we'll end up telling this story as a curious anecdote? We don't know yet. Maybe one day we'll wake up to dramatic headlines about Japan, or maybe nothing will happen at all. Time will tell. But if one thing is clear, it's that, no matter what happens, humanity has shown time and again that it can resist, adapt, and move forward. Just like many Japanese people do online, maybe, we too can look to the future with a smile on our face and a touch of elegance. Even if we don't know what's coming, keeping a good sense of humor can be a powerful shield against uncertainty. And in the meantime, in silence, we can make a small wish from the heart, that tragedies remain in fiction and apocalyptic texts. That in the summer of 2025, cherry blossoms continue painting Japan's streets pink, that the Pacific Ocean keeps gently breaking against the coast, and that we can keep peacefully enjoying new anime, movies, and the usual routine. Of course, this last part with a touch of humor. What we really want is for life to carry on normally, and to keep the light tone. If something impactful really does happen in 2025, we'll be able to return to this moment, review all the predictions, and debate who came closest to getting it right. But if nothing happens, even better, we'll laugh together and, as always, find another mysterious topic to talk about. Whatever path the future takes, the important thing is not to lose three things: curiosity, critical thinking, and optimism. Perhaps that's the true prophecy we all need to keep moving forward. So starting now, we wish that 2025 will be a year full of peace, discoveries, and yes, a little bit of excitement. But the good kind.